Hello everybody, my name is Kathy Jarvis and welcome to my garden. Today we're going to talk about planting the spring garden. Now I know it's a long time away, we got all winter yet to go, but right now is really the perfect time to be thinking about the spring garden because you have all your successes and your failures in your mind right this minute. So we can look around and we can decide what we want to plant next year, how much we want to plant, and then look and decide what seeds we need to buy and get them ordered before the spring rush. So join me with a cool drink and as I observe my garden and decide what to plant next year. The first thing we need to do is look around and decide what we really did good with and make a list of these things. Don't worry about it being a short list, especially if you're new at gardening and just getting started. Because even people who have experience with gardens for years have failures every year. There are things that we just cannot control or have very little control of, such as the weather, the bugs, the type of diseases that the plants get every year. All these things are factors into what does good and what doesn't. And one year you may have a bunch of okra, and the next year you move it somewhere and it doesn't do as well. So, like this year, my strawberries did really well, my bush beans did well, the butternut squash did well, cantaloupes and the watermelons and the turnips, and the marigolds planted with the kale did a very good job outside. Inside the greenhouse, my tomatoes and my peppers and my cucumbers and the marigolds did really well. The Swiss chard, the kale, the tomato, and the peppers and the herbs did nicely on the balcony. I did my summer squashes and my zucchinis in pots this year, and that worked out really well. The ones inside the greenhouse did better than ones outside also. I did herbs in the hanging baskets as well as the shade garden, and the ones here in the hanging baskets did the best. Now the next thing you need to look at is what didn't work and try to figure out why so you can make changes next year. My spring peas failed completely. They were just getting ready to harvest, and they weren't that many to begin with when the critters got into them and took them completely out. So I need to figure out a way to keep the critters away from the peas. Either that or plant them in the fall, because my fall peas are doing well and they have not had any animals get into them. My okra did not do well this year. Usually I have no problem with okra. This year I planted it in the shade of this pear tree and it just didn't work. They stayed short. They are not blooming as well as they should. So next year I'm going to have to move them back out into the sun. The outside lettuce, broccoli, and cauliflower and cabbage that I planted in the spring did not do well. It got too hot and it bolted. So I did not have a good harvest on those. And then the cabbage worm came and got into the broccoli and the cauliflower and the cabbage and took most of those out. So I'm going to have to figure out how to keep those cool and put a net over them or something to keep the butterfly moth off of them. The pumpkins, they failed again. I've tried, I don't know how many times. I put them in the ground, I put them in tubs, I've tried everything, and they get big pumpkins on them, and then I thought I was going to have one pumpkin this year, then the windstorm took it out, so I'm not having any luck with my pumpkins. The fruit trees, they had a lot of insect damage to them, even though I sprayed, but I didn't spray on a regular basis, so I need to learn to spray and keep on schedule. On the balcony, the lettuce and the onions and the spinach failed because the birds decided they would like to snack on them. So if I'm going to put those up there, I'm going to have to put a netting over them also. Third thing you have to look at is there anything that you planted this year that you do not want to plant again? Either your family didn't like it didn't grow well, or you just had too much of it and you want to plant less of it. I do not have the best luck with broccoli or cauliflower or cabbage. So I'm really debating about even trying again. All of those plants take up a lot of space for only one head of crop per plant. So I've got a big garden, but I'm still limited on what I can plant. So I may plant less of those and put them on one bed that I can cover and do it in the fall and not in the spring. Or I may not do it at all. We use a lot of broccoli, but we don't use much cauliflower, and we don't use much cabbage. I like to grow some cabbage slaw, but let's face it, I can go and get a head of cabbage from the farmer's market and let them worry about the spacing, and I can use my garden for other spaces. So another thing you need to figure out is, do you want to try anything different next year? Like I plan on putting my okra back in the sunny spots and the lettuce over here in the shady, and do the broccoli and the cauliflower and stuff in the fall instead of the spring maybe. My po beans I may have to do differently. I'm going to plant inside the tars instead of the outside because we keep hitting them with the lawnmower and cutting them off. So that's just a few things you have to think about. I also want to try to plant more things in the greenhouse during the winter. Okay, let's look at another thing that we need to look at. And what do you want to plant more of next year? What vegetables did you use the most and ran out of and wish that you had more of them? For me, it's onions. So I'm going to have to do a whole bed of onions. And I'm going to have to do a whole bed of peppers, because those are the things that we use the most. I use those a lot in the freezing process and making pickles and relish and stuff with my cucumbers. So I really need more of those. I plan on planting more carrots and more zucchini and summer squash because we use a lot of that. Also, I need to plant more tomatoes. The meaty type, the romaine type, I need to plant some of those. And of course the regular slicing tomatoes, I need more of them. I need to make more potato buckets too. I just didn't have enough potatoes to last the whole year. Now think, what do you need to plant less of? Which vegetables do your family like but they don't really eat a whole bunch of? I had way too many cherry tomatoes this year, and that was my own fault. I picked up the flat of cherry tomatoes instead of the regular tomatoes, and I planted those out, and then I didn't have room for my regular tomatoes. So that was my own fault. I also need to do less cucumbers next year. I have like 10 cucumber plants, and I am overwhelmed with cucumbers. I'm giving them away. Remember how you used to with these zucchinis, you would find them on your door? That's what I'm doing with my cucumbers. I'm calling up friends and saying, do you need cucumbers? And if they say yes, they get cucumbers. Not one or two, but they get cucumbers. So I'm going to have to plant less of those next year. Alright, another thing we need to do this time of year is check your seed inventory. You can harvest seeds from your plants now at the end of the season, as long as they're open pollinated, self-pollinated, or heirloom varieties. You just want, for the open pollinated, you want to make sure that they're not cross-pollinated with another species. If they're like if you have two different types of green beans, like over there I've got Lacy Housewife, and over here I've got Blue Lake. So you have to have them far enough apart so they don't cross-pollinate. But go ahead and check your seed catalog, seed inventory, and decide what you want to plant. And get ready to order those seeds as soon as possible, because this year we did have a seed shortage, and some people did not get their seeds, or they did not get the correct seeds. The other thing you need to look at is the function of the garden itself. Do you need to improve the paths? Do you need to improve the beds? The soil itself? Do you need to add new structures? More beds, less beds, more bean tars, bird feeders, bird baths, anything that would make your garden more pleasant and easier to work with. Now for me, I keep saying, I don't know how many times I've said this year, I need a bigger greenhouse. So that is my number one priority that I'm looking at, is to see if there's room out front for a bigger greenhouse, how much that would run me, and whether it's worth the money and time and effort. Another thing is, I still have that little shed I need to put up, which will make things a lot easier because I can have all my gardening tools in that shed and not have to carry them back and forth from the house. I stored them last year in the greenhouse, and that took up way too much room. Like this year, I added the bucket stand for my bucket garden, which has been a great success. So just little things like that could make things easier for you. Whether you need to add water out here, that's what I did this summer. They were working on our well and stuff, so I asked them to put a spigot out here, which they did. You might consider running electricity out to your greenhouses if that's a possibility. Just different things that you could do over the winter when you're not so busy in the garden itself working. I love this picnic table, but it's weeds underneath of it all the time, and I have to constantly take the weed whip or move it or whatever, and so I need to figure out a way to either put it on gravel or put it on pavers or wood chips or something, so I don't have to weed as much. Anything will make it easier for yourself. My strawberry pyramids back there, they never did work out the way they should, and as you can see in the background, they're a weedy mess. So I need to take and turn that into one long bed and take out the pyramid and make it easier, so I don't have to get the weed whip out each time and weed whip between the two beds, because there's not room enough for the mower to go through. The grapes, they need a arbor, so I need to work on that for more support. I need to make some netting for the gardens if I'm going to have broccoli or cabbage or anything like that. And anything in my low growing things like lettuce and spinach and stuff, I like to have a netting over them just to keep the cats out and the other animals away from the garden. So those are a few things that you can be working on over the winter. We got a truck going by. Alright. That's just a few of the things that you can work on during the winter when you have extra time. But the other thing to look at right now is, what do you have to do before winter comes? Like, I'm going to add some plastic over a couple of these garden beds and put some lettuce and spinach in there and see if I can extend the season a little bit more. I will planning on doing that, the same thing inside the greenhouse. I'm going to put lettuce and stuff, and then I'm going to put a hoop over those to make a double greenhouse, basically. The greenhouse inside a greenhouse to put the lettuce in to see if I can make it go farther this winter. Just little experiments that you like to try. And another thing is to look and see if there's anything you can do in the garden to make it more appealing in the wintertime when everything's bare. And that could be either bird feeders. You can put that way the birds will come in, and not only will they come in and eat the food, they'll also scratch around in your garden and get the grubs and stuff out of the soil. That will be helpful for you next spring. Without less grubs in there, you'll have less problems as far as diseases going and bugs eating your plants. You can put statues out. I have scarecrows out, and I usually leave them out. Some of them will have to come in and get new clothes put on them, but that's another winter project. So just try to make it as pleasing as possible and have it all ready and wanting to, so that you want to come back out here in the spring and get gardening again. So I hope you learned something, and I hope that you have a good year of gardening next year. And remember, dream big. Bye now.